So, to absolutely no one's surprise, Doge is absolutely going the exact same way it did in, well, America when it started. Because when it first went in, they immediately started announcing, over in Elon Musk's version of it, that, oh, they found all this waste, fraud, and abuse. Aren't they good? Aren't they so good finding out all this waste, fraud, and abuse almost immediately, right? Well, guess what? Reform UK, with their Doge unit down in Kent, are doing the exact same thing. So they are claiming that their Doge team has found 2.8 million, right, in confirmed fraud last year. That is what they are claiming. And this is all just the start, right? Except they did not find it, right? They did not find it. This was found out by Kent County Council's own internal fraud investigation team. Okay? And when they looked into it, nearly all of them were not fraud, meaning that there is no open police investigation or anything like that. The vast majority of them came down to human error. When they looked into them, they investigated them, most of them were human error. If they are so certain that these are fraud, why are they not referring some of these cases to the police? They're not, because they've already done this last year under the previous Conservative administration. This was all known about. They found nothing. They have found nothing because all that was already known about, and it wasn't waste, fraud, or abuse. It was human error. And I think, once again, this goes to show you just how bad they really are at understanding local government and local councils and, how they work. So we're going to go on into exploring more of this because I can entirely predict now what is going to happen, that they're going to sort of roll out a couple more of these things in the coming days of, oh, we found this, fraud. Well, okay, report it to the police. If it's fraud, report it to the police then, right? Oh, that's right. Councils have their own internal fraud investigation unit. Guess what? They work it out. Most of the time, it's not fraud or someone trying to commit fraud. It comes down to basic human error. So, anyway, let's get more into this then, shall we? Because I suspect we're going to have to be talking about a lot of this because a certain someone has been spamming that response in the chat for the past couple of days. Well, at least the past since this came out. But again, completely wrong. This already was known about by the previous Conservative administration, done by, again, the own internal council audit. Shock horror. Anyway, let's get on into this. But before we do that, please click on the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, if you're new to the channel, hit the subscribe button. And of course, there are the Patreon page, there's the Buy Me Coffee link, there's the YouTube thank you button. And of course, as always, there's the Pony Club down below as well. So let's crack on then into this. So this comes from the local government reporting unit with basically the title of Reforms Doge is Beyond Insulting. So, to suggest that there is significant waste left to cut in local government ignores reality and the transparency of which councils operate. So, Reform UK has launched its now own Doge-style efficiency program in local government, in line now with the commitment made during last month's local election campaign. Fresh, of course, from its announcing ambitions to make between 300 billion to 400 billion cuts into public services nationally if they win the next general election. Reform Chair on Monday, Zia Youssef, announced that the party was now turning attention to cutting waste in local government. Modelled, of course, on the Department of Government Efficiency set up by Donald Trump, a unit now of software engineers, data analysts, and forensic auditors led by a 28-year-old tech entrepreneur, Nathaniel Fried, has now been reportedly set to examine Kent County Council's books. Again, oh wow, you're going to trust this 28-year-old tech entrepreneur to report on this? And bear in mind, we're going to be looking into who this Nathaniel is in the next couple of videos. Don't worry about that. We'll get to him when we get to him. But at least we now know who this mysterious tech entrepreneur is. So Kent now has, by its own account, of course, been teetering on the brink of bankruptcy for a number of years. And all, of course, the usual pressures experienced by upper tier councils now across the country, in adult social care to children's social care, special needs, disabilities to home and school transport. These have all been exacerbated by the council being very at the sharp end of the small boats crisis and having to deal with hundreds of unaccompanied asylum seeking children. So, where might, of course, all these savings be hiding? In his statement on Twitter, Yusuf highlighted the local government contracts being out to now only one bidder on road maintenance being let out for 27 years. But while, of course, to a former Goldman Sachs executive, this may, of course, at first appear inefficient. But it is most likely the former, because of the value of the contract was far too low to attract any other bidders, while the latter was, of course, an in itself now an attempt to keep costs down. Earlier today, Yusuf, of course, took to Twitter again to report now some irregular spending uncovered by at Kent, totaling, of course, and this is where we get to the reports this morning, of a 2.8 million. These include £36,000 of taxpayers' money being sent to a care provider for someone who had already died. However, this information came to and was reported by the county's own fraud team, which then went to the Governance and Audit Committee over a year ago. So much for all that hidden waste. After years of austerity, and which finding now funding per head is now significantly below what it was back in 2010, it is still beyond insulting now to the officers and councillors who have now kept the ship from sinking to presume that Mr. Fried, with no experience of running anything other than a tech startup, can now succeed in finding significant waste left to cut where they have failed. Writing yesterday on LinkedIn, Owen Marpley, the chief executive of the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy, made the point that Kent had published over 200 pages now of financial details when it agreed to its budget earlier this year. He said, "I know of no other government sector that is already this transparent where there is funding comes from and how and where it was to be spent. So let's not pretend that there is now some great secret to uncover. Let us not pretend that there is no transparency." When Mr. Fried and his team have now finished in, of course, Maidstone, they may well, of course, find significant insufficiencies, but none of these will be news to any of the readers of the LGC, or none of them will, of course, be solved without further investment, at least in the short term. The, quote, payment irregularities highlighted above are, of course, unlikely to be reduced further by cuts to staff in terms of administrating them, for example. Given his course background, Mr. Fried may, of course, be baffled by the continuing reliance on legacy technologies and, of course, the patches and the workarounds employed to do just the basics. His mind may very well be blown around the spend on placements for a handful of high-needs special needs children with the private sector providers who hold councils now to ransom. Council-run provision, of course, having been cut long ago in many of the previous efficiency drives. On examining, of course, the home-to-school transport budget, he may also find himself agreeing with Kent's own former Conservative leader, Roger Goff, who, of course, to that consideration should be given to now means testing this service. However, unless the government wants now to change the law, he would, of course, be powerless to do anything beyond ensure that routes are as efficient as possible and that the drive down of the use of the individual taxis. Of course, all these things which councils and all these responsibilities, they are already doing. Like I say, he's not going to find anything, to be honest. And of course, for adult social care, he will find that the rates now for local authorities that they currently pay to care phones for older people have already now been subsidized by self-funders, while those now providing domiciliary care are also being paid more than the minimum wage. Good luck finding significant savings there. Short, of course, the illegal, not to mention immoral action now of turfing out the vulnerable now onto the streets and ceasing now to provide all these services, reform will find very little to shift on the dial. If, of course, being presented with the findings, the new Kent administration wants to follow the example of the US Doge and start slashing significant numbers of staff, they would do well to remember that local government employment now is already at a record low. A serious national conversation about local government is, of course, needed in reflection to this responsibilities is now long overdue. If reform generally actually wants the best people and places it is now responsible for, it should be using its significant national platform to start such a discussion. But the meaningful debate must now be based on reality, not the fantasy and conspiracy. The tone and tenor that comments now from Reform's national representative so far suggests this is not what we are going to get. Again, shock horror, right? Shock horror. Yeah, and they're right. They are absolutely 100% right there. There is nothing left. Like, councils were on the receiving end of austerity. They were the ones made to bear the brunt of austerity. There is nothing left to cut. So I don't know what on earth this guy is going to find out or presume to find, but it's madness. Madness to think that this guy is somehow going to find any, stuff like this. And you look at the other things that the claiming that we found in this other stuff. You look into it, you go back into a local newspaper that did a whole report on this a year ago. And guess what? Their own council fraud team found out no, it wasn't fraud. It was just people not up to date with the system. In one case, it was because someone had gone on long-term sick and the rest of the people in the council were just not aware that this person had gone on long-term sick. So they kept sending stuff through, and because that person wasn't there, it was being missed. Why? Because council budgets are so low, as was stated there, council staff, administration, so low now, such a low point of like employment for these people, they can't afford to hire more staff. Who are they going to cut? Madness. Madness in that way lies. But we'll see. We'll see what recommendations this guy ends up making, but they're not going to be good. Going to be good in the least. Anyway, as always, let me know what you think about all this down below. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.